One of the classic case studies of all time is the story of Victor, the wild boy of Aveyron. And I've come to Paris to find out why it is that his story has stood the test of time.
He was to solve the great intellectual question of the era. Are we made what we are through what we learn, through our senses, or are we born this way? It's the nature-nurture controversy.
And it's a controversy that continues in psychology to this day. Victor the wild boy didn't solve it. For the experts involved, this was a tale of professional disappointment. For Victor, it was a tale of deprivation, and maybe even attempted murder. But when he showed up in the Aveyron district at the beginning of the 19th century, an apparently feral child, he seemed to be the answer to a philosopher's prayer. Psychologist Jeff Rolls.
It was a chance to test Jean-Jacques Rousseau's idea of the noble savage. Does society corrupt people? So they got this wild child. He hadn't been subject to any of society's civilising process, and then they could obviously find out how he would adapt to that situation. He was the talk of Europe, the wild boy of Aveyron.
I have ordered brought to your orphanage, citizen, an unidentified child who appears congenitally deaf and mute. There is, moreover, something extraordinary in his behaviour, which makes him seem close to the state of wild animals. He lives only on potatoes and nuts. If given other food, he smells it, bites it, then spits it out and throws it away. These facts leave no doubt that the child has lived in the woods for a long time. He never speaks. If you take his potatoes away from him, he lets out sharp cries.
Back in January 1800, when Victor was about 11 or 12, we think, he appeared from the woods surrounding the village of Saint-Sernin in southwest France. In 1970, Francois Truffaut made this film, The Wild Child, in which Truffaut himself played Itard, the doctor who treated Victor. It was this film, plus a chance encounter with the story of another wild child, a boy who'd been kept in a henhouse in 1950s Northern Ireland, which inspired student Michael Newton to change the topic of his PhD thesis from ghosts to wild children, and to write a book.
Victor was discovered very shortly after the French Revolution. Part of the revolutionary's idea was really to return to a kind of state of nature. Society had become corrupt, the rich exploited the poor. The thing you need to do is to kind of wipe the slate clean and return to the beginning. Part of that is an interest in the origins of humanity. And one thing that Victor represented was such an origin. He was like the wild children that Jean-Jacques Rousseau had written about in his philosophy. So the revolution had been fought in the name of a kind of image of the state of nature. And then along comes a human being who embodies that state of nature.
We would not be talking about Victor now if he hadn't attracted the attention of a very particular group of people, that is, scientists and philosophers.
Adriana Benzaken is Associate Professor of History at the University of Mount St. Vincent in Nova Scotia.
The Abbé Bonaterre was a naturalist in Aveyron, was the first to obtain permission from the government to study him. But it was the scientists in Paris who had been lobbying the government to bring the boy to Paris, and they managed to get the Minister of the Interior, Lucien Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon, to have him transferred to the capital in this summer of 1800. So it was through the scientists that the government continued its involvement in the case and its financial support for the case.
While I'm in Paris, I've come to see Harlan Lane. Now, he's Professor of Psychology at Northeastern University in Boston in the USA, but he happens to be in Paris on sabbatical at the moment, and he also happens to have written a book all about Victor.
He didn't sneeze, he didn't weep. He lacked all of these things that you would have thought, like temperature sensitivity, you would have thought, well, that's mostly endowed. But no, he loved the snow. I mean, there's no reason to doubt Bonaterre. And he said the boy would go romping without clothes. He tried to clothe him, of course, and the boy would just take off the clothes. He put his hand in a fire. So I'm inclined to think that there's more of a social and experiential overlay on temperature sensitivity than we realize.
When he first came to Paris, what was the public reaction?
Oh, he was a cause célèbre. There were big stories in the newspapers. People came to see him. Victor of Aveyron arrived at a time that was probably unequaled in Western history for intellectual foment. It was the time when psychiatry first began to be a profession. It was the time when anatomy had its founding work done.